Hi guys, welcome back. On Tuesday, we talked about the executive branch. Well, today we're going to talk about the legislative branch. So let's get started. Within the legislative branch, we want to know who is in there, what their duties are, and how do they do checks and balances of the other branches. So our first one is, who is in the legislative branch? Well, the Congress is in the legislative branch. Now, the Congress is divided up into two different groups, the Senate and the House of Representatives. So those are the two groups in Congress. Now, what are the duties of these two groups in Congress? Well, the first one for them to do is to make the laws. And then they amend the laws, kind of like the amendments. When we talked about the Bill of Rights, there were amendments in there where the amendments are amends to the laws. So the legislative branch makes the laws, and they can also amend the laws that are already there. Another duty that they have is to create a budget. Okay? Creating a budget is they basically decide how much money the government is going to spend on certain things. Some of the things that they decide would be how much money the government's going to spend on education, how much money the government is going to spend on our military, how much money is the government going to spend on our farmers and things like that. So all the different things that the government spends money on, the legislative branch helps decide how much it's going to be. The other thing that they do is they decide when to make new money. So like if the Congress decides, or the legislative branch decides that we need more $1 bills or more $10 bills or more quarters or more pennies, they decide when we need to make more money. Another thing they do is they decide how much tax money they need to charge the people. So when your parents go to work, they get a paycheck. Well, part of that paycheck always has to go back to the government. So the legislative branch decides how much of that money from your parents' paycheck is going to go back to the government. So that's part of what they decide. That's called a tax. It's called the income tax. The last duty that the legislative branch has is they get to decide when to declare war. So when we had World War I and World War II, the legislative branch, the Congress, decided if we were going to go to war with the other countries or not. They decide that. Now, how does the legislative branch check and watch the powers of the other branches? Let's look at that. The first thing that they get to do is the legislative branch confirms or rejects the president's nominations. Do you remember on Tuesday we talked about how the president was able to nominate the Supreme Court justices and some of the cabinet members that were with him? He can nominate them, but he doesn't for sure get to pick them. The legislative branch gets to either confirm or reject, which means they either agree or disagree. They can either say yes to his nomination or no to his nomination. So that's one way that they can check the power of the president. Another way is that the legislative branch can impeach the president, but only in very exceptional times, only when something absolutely unknown was happening. And impeaching means basically they fire the president. They say, President, you're fired. So that's what the legislative branch can do, but only in very exceptional, only in very special times can they do that. The last way that the legislative branch can check the power is they can overturn the president's veto with a certain amount of votes. We also said that one way that the president can check the legislative branch's powers is that he could veto or say no to any one of the laws that they make. Well, just like that, if there's enough people in the legislative branch that vote for it, they can say, you know what, Mr. President? We like that law, and we're not going to let you veto it. We're not going to let you get rid of it. We're going to keep it. So that is another way that the legislative branch can check the power of the executive branch and make sure that they don't have too much control. So these are the quick overviews of what the legislative branch can do. Now, who remembers the person who had the idea to have the three branches of government that was at the Constitutional Convention, the meeting that was talking about it? Who remembers who that was? Yes, it was James Madison's idea to have the three branches of government. Now, in the Articles of Confederation, that was the original laws that they were trying to kind of make stronger. It said that every state could have one vote in the legislative branch. They could have one vote in Congress. But James Madison, hold on a second, guys, I'm a little stuck here. There we go. James Madison thought that if the bigger states had more people, then they should have more power, more representation in the Congress. Now, the smaller states didn't like that so much because they thought that wouldn't be fair to them. So if the large states had more votes, then they would be able to control the national government better. No one would listen to the small states. The small states said that each state should have the same number of representatives. So now we're at a point where there's two different ideas and they're not agreeing on them. It's kind of like when you go onto the playground and you want to play a game and you have two people and they have two different sets of rules and you like your rules and they like their rules and you guys can't decide on them. What's one of the strategies that we tell you that you can try to do to help fix that situation? Yes, you can come up with a compromise. You can try to compromise on the rules and find something that you both agree on. One of the delegates that was at that meeting about the Constitution did come up with a compromise. A compromise is an agreement that is not exactly what either side wants, but something both sides can agree on. The Great Compromise divided Congress into two groups. The Senate was one of the groups, and the House of Representatives was the other group. In the House, each state would have a certain number of representatives. This number would depend on how large or how small the state was. In the Senate, each state would have two representatives. Both the large states and the small states accepted this plan, and both got what they wanted. So they found a great compromise in their ideas and a great way to help run our country. So now we're going to kind of go through and talk about each one of these groups. The first group we're going to talk about is the Senate. Now, in the Senate, the Vice President is in charge of the Senate. And that's the first thing we need to know. The Vice President is in charge of the Senate. Now, if you want to be a senator, if you want to work in the Senate, you have to be at least 30 years old. You also have to be a citizen of America for 9 years. You have to at least have been a citizen of the United States for 9 years. And you have to live in the state that you represent. So if you wanted to be a senator for the state of Florida, you can't live in California because that wouldn't make any sense. If you want to be a representative or a senator for the state of Florida, you have to live in the state of Florida. The next thing is the senators are voted by the people, which is another example of how we are a republic. Our government is run by representatives that we vote for. The senators help run our government, and we get to vote for them. And if you're going to be a senator, you get to be a senator for 6 years. That's a long time. That's just a very long time. 6 years. After that 6 years, then you can get voted for again, and you can run another 6 years. That can go on and on and on and on. You could serve an unlimited amount of times. Just as long as every 6 years you get voted for, you get to keep being a senator. So you could be a senator until you are 150 years old if you live that long. Now remember, in our Great Compromise, they said that they wanted to have a Congress that had 2 representatives per state, 2 senators per state. So this was the House that has that, 2 per state. Doesn't matter how many people live in that state, they still get 2 per state. Now, who remembers how many states we have? How many states do we have? Yes, we have, let's see if I can fit this in here. Yes, we have 50 states. Okay? So if we have 50 states, and there are 2 senators per state, how many senators can we have in the Senate? 50 states, 2 per state, 100. There we go. So we can have, there are 100 senators in the Senate. So this is the Senate. Now we're going to talk about the other group. The other group is the House of Representatives. Now, in the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House is in charge of the House of Representatives. If you want to be a House of Representative person, you have to be at least 25 years old. You have to be a citizen of the United States for 7 years. Remember, over here for the Senate, you had to be a citizen for 9 years. But here, you have to be a citizen for 7 years. Same thing as a senator. You have to live in the state that you represent. So if you wanted to be a representative for the state of, say, Illinois, well, you can't live in Florida because you don't know anything about Illinois if you're living in Florida. So if you want to be a representative of Illinois, you have to live in Illinois. Also, like the Senate, the House of Representatives are voted on by the people. So we get to vote for who we want our representatives to be. Now, the senators get to be there for 6 years. They get to work for 6 years, and then they get voted again. Well, in the House of Representatives, you work for 2 years, and then you get to be voted on again. Just like in the Senate, though, you can go on and on and on and on. As long as you get voted for, you can keep going. So this is also, you can serve unlimited times. So you could serve in the House of Representatives until you were 150 years old, too. Just like in the Senate. Now, over here we said you get 2 per state. No matter how many people live in your state, you get 2 per state. That was one side of the compromise. This is the other side of the compromise. This one is by population. So the more people you have in your state, the more representatives you get to have. So if you look here, if you live in California, which is has the most people, the state that has the most people living in it, California has 53 people in the House of Representatives. Alaska does not have very many people living in it. It's a lot less people living in Alaska than living in California. So Alaska only has 1 person in the House of Representatives. So depending on how many people live in your state, that determines how many people are in the House of Representatives. But there is a total of 435 representatives in the House of Representatives. That is a lot of people. That's got to be a pretty big building. But now I want to talk about this area here in the middle. The reason why they wanted this big compromise. So we said California has the most people living in the state. So it has 53 representatives. Florida, we have 27 representatives in the House of Representatives. Georgia, because of how many people live in their state, they have 14. Hawaii, because of how many people they have 2. Alaska, because of how many they have, we said, they only have 1 person. So if our legislative branch, our Congress, was only like the House of Representatives, which state do you think would get to have the most say in how our government was run? Do you think Alaska would get much vote and much say if they only had 1 person talking for Alaska? Or do you think California would have the most ideas about how the government should run? Because they have 53 people who get to vote. Yeah, California would get to say most about how our government is run. And that's not really fair, because Alaska's a state and California's a state. So they wanted to make sure that they had enough speaking voice about how the government should run. So that's why they came up with the Senate, to have 2, because it doesn't matter. California has 2 senators. Florida has 2 senators. Georgia has 2 senators. Hawaii has 2 senators. Alaska has 2 senators. So in the Senate, every state has the same chance and the same amount of people to talk for them. In the House of Representatives, depends on how many people you have. But in the Senate, it's all equal. So that's how they came up with that great compromise. Now, one last thing I want to tell you. It's an interesting job that the Speaker of the House has. Not only is he in charge of the House of Representatives, but we talked on Tuesday about the Vice President and what his role was. And if the President wasn't able to be President anymore, then the Vice President would take over. Well, this is my little chart here. Let's see if I can get this so you can see it. There we go. So if the President cannot be President anymore, if he's sick or something happens to him and he's not able to do his job, the Vice President takes over. Okay, that was on there. It's all wiped off, but that did say President on there. The Vice President takes over. Now, if the Vice President gets sick or can't do his job, guess who takes over as President? The Speaker of the House. So the head of the House of Representatives gets to become the President of the United States if anything happens to the President and the Vice President. I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, last thing I want to talk to you about is our assignment for today. Okay, here is our trifold that we've been talking about. There we go. On Tuesday we did the executive branch. Okay, and you took a picture and sent it into your homeroom teacher. Awesome. Thank you all for doing that. Today we're going to do the legislative branch. This time I want you to tell me who is in the legislative branch. What were the people, or what are the names of the groups of the people that are in the legislative branch? What are their duties? How do they check the powers of the other branches? And then on the bottom, I want you to compare and contrast the Senate and the House of Representatives. I want you to tell me one comparison and one contrast of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Remember that compare means alike, something that they have in common, and contrast is something that they have differently. Tell me something that is different about the House and the Senate. And there's a whole list of things up there. There we go. So if you have forgotten any of these information, you can always go back to the video, hit pause when you see it, and look through and find the answers. After you have filled in the center part for legislative branch, take a picture of that and send it to your homeroom teacher. And again, as always, if you have any questions about anything, just email us and we can help you with it. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope you're all being very safe. And tomorrow when you come back, we're going to talk about the judicial branch of government and see how that works. All right, guys, have a great day. No, I'm sorry, that's for tomorrow. Never mind. Have a great day. I'll see you guys later. Bye.